So as Ashwini said, my name is Ujjwal, and I lead machine learning for healthcare and life sciences at AWS. I've been here for a little over 9.5 years, so been very fortunate to be having a front row seat essentially to this AI wave, and now seeing it in action in topics like drug discovery has been very gratifying. And I have an excellent panel today, and we are going to talk about federated learning. So why don't we begin with intros? So we'll go with Robin first.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for having us. So my name is Robin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Apheris. That's a company building federated data networks in the life science industry. So for everyone who doesn't know what federated data networks is, it's when multiple organizations want to collaborate on data that is sensitive, but these data sets can't be, and hence these data sets can't be shared. You can still use these combined data sources of multiple parties to train more powerful models. And so for that, you leverage federated computing as a technology. And that's what we provide to life science data networks. And one of the very exciting data networks that we'll be speaking about today is as well a data network with many large pharma companies, including AbbVie and J&J. So.
Excellent. You want to go next?
Yep, love to. My name is John Kerr-Nicholas. I lead our computational drug discovery organization at AbbVie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Shear, and I'm from Johnson & Johnson, Innovative Medicine. And I lead a team that's basically a platform team that brings all computational tools into the drug discovery process. So we work across modalities and work on all the different areas of start to nomination of a clinical candidate.
Great. Well, as you can see, I mean, we have a great representation on this panel. We've got two of the largest pharmaceutical industry representatives that we work with. We've got a partner who provides a very unique technology in federated learning. And then, we are all enabling all of this to happen on AWS. So what I really like about the topic today is it's not just about a technology, it's about an application of that technology in a very valid problem. And that problem is around the specificity of data. So as you think about the challenges in drug discovery, I'd love to hear thoughts from the panel, but we've always run into these issues about data availability, sovereignty, and its ability to be shared across. And that generates a problem of not having enough data in a lot of cases. So I think the first question I would like to address maybe to our panelists from AbbVie and J&J on what do you think are the limitations? When you think about drug discovery, there's a lot of talk about AI-driven drug discovery today. And there are open source models that are being produced on a regular basis. But we are not seeing the traction that we were hoping that AI would bring immediately, right, from these models. So there's obviously going to be a gap, right, in this whole story. So where that gap is, and why don't you go, John, first?
Sure, I'm happy to. So AI, we have at AbbVie a very large investment in AI and interest throughout the organization in AI. And this permeates really all facets of our very large organization, all ranging from, at the earliest stages, R&D and drug discovery, up to factory of the future and automation in the operation stage. With respect to R&D, drug discovery is a challenging problem, of course, and so there's many facets, even in the R&D component, ranging from target identification to actually identifying new therapeutic agents, to designing clinical trials and stratifying patients and digital pathology, and all of precisely the applications that we heard about earlier today. And our goal at AbbVie is to infuse AI methods into all of those because we see value and opportunity in each of those components. With respect to designing new therapeutic agents, which is what primarily we're going to talk about today, there's opportunities at every stage, ranging from initial hit discovery to property optimization, so ADME and PK properties, avoiding metabolic liabilities. And so numerous opportunities there. And with respect to data certainly is a limitation in the sense that while AbbVie has extensive data that we've collected internally over the years of our existence. So Jennifer alluded earlier, AbbVie is only 12 years old as a company, as a spin out from Abbott, but many decades of data that have been compiled starting in the Abbott days. despite this wealth of data that we have internally, a lot of that data is focused in a very punctate way. So from a chemistry standpoint, when we work on a given chemical series, we routinely make 1,000 analogs that are closely related to one another. But the sampling of chemical space that we have internally is sort of punctate because of the history of how we work in drug discovery. And so certainly, I think with respect to data, one of the challenges is that the data is collected in a very focused way across individual chemical series rather than broadly. And then to the point that Rich Bonneau brought up earlier, where often there's a funnel, and so a large number of many experiments are collected only for, let me say it the other way around. Certain experiments are collected for all the compounds we make, and then as experiments get more focused and expensive, we collect them for fewer and fewer compounds. And so there's a bit of an asymmetry in terms of what data is available for what specific chemical agents. And so this is true, for example, in PK, where we have lots and lots of data for ADME, in vitro ADME experiments, less for rodent PK, and even less for PK in higher species. And so certainly there's challenges in data, and that's part of where federated learning comes in.
Yeah, and I'd love to get to federated learning in a minute, but if I have to ask, Justin, when you think about data sharing, like this is an aspect of AbbVie that you've, found out works for you, but I'm sure you have your own ways of collecting data, regulating its distribution. Where have you seen some challenges in that space?
Well, I think, so it's a good question. Data sharing is difficult, right? We definitely don't naturally think about data sharing amongst our peers and competitors, right? It's our data. It's something that we invested in. Actually, we heard in the last presentation, what we do in R&D is basically produce data, and that's our goal. But even within an organization, it can be difficult to share data, even though you're part of the same company. And some of that boils down to infrastructure, the way data is set up or managed. In other cases, it's a cultural thing because we sort of have that data. And I think where we're going is actually thinking much more openly, much more forward thinking about data and the importance of data sort of in the big picture.
Right.
I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, and it's unique, right? Like you just mentioned that you don't share data with your competitors, which is obviously true. But here we are still talking, together on stage, and that's the beauty of federated learning. So let's get to that topic, right? So what is federated learning, and what is Apheris doing to solve that problem?
So federated learning is a technique where essentially you enable to keep data at the source, so within the IT environments of the respective data custodians. In our example, the pharma companies, they have valuable data that cannot be shared. And so with federated learning or federated computing, this data is not shared. But still what you can do is you train one model across the distributed data of multiple parties. And you do so in a IP preserving and governed manner. And we can talk later more about what is actually needed to make federated learning secure and keep the IP protected. But what it enables us is ultimately bring multiple parties together and collaborate. And so this is what happens here in the AI Structural Biology Consortium, which is a large pharma-to-pharma network. So 6 top 10, top 20 pharma companies are involved to date. We expect more to join. And so the intention is to collaborate across a variety of use cases that are impactful and ultimately address these problems John and Justin just mentioned, which is there is not enough diversity in the public domain. There is this valuable data that pharma companies have collected over the decades of research that they did. And so unlocking value in a collaborative manner can really lead to the breakthroughs that we all need for the next foundational models.
Absolutely. And it almost sounds like magic, right? Like where we are right now is you've got two companies who are not going to share openly their data with each other, but they are still working for the common good of creating a centralized model that can benefit each other. Like it's amazing that federated learning as a platform can allow you to do that. There's obviously it's not as simple, right? because there are a lot of inherent challenges in building a system like this, right from the infrastructure layer to the application layer. When you thought about solving these problems through the platform that Apheris provides, what was your thought process? Like, when did you go after specific use cases that you work backward from? How much, I would say, commonality do you see at the platform level for such problems in drug discovery versus some other areas?
Yeah, so I think federated learning as a technique and technology has been around for a couple of years, but over the last years you've really seen, let's say, the algorithmic side advancing quite strongly, right? So today you get many more integrations of algorithms to be able to run them in a federated manner. Now, if I go to a pharma company and say, I can now run this piece of software on your data in combination with the data from another pharma company, right? That's clearly not enough to ultimately get people to collaborate. So we call this at Apheris the data custodian needs, right? Federated learning somehow addresses machine learning engineering needs, take an algorithm, split it up, and bring it together. Whereas the data custodian needs are, what is the governance that I have around that? What is it that makes this actually secure? How can I tie a legal framework or my IP protection requirements to this when I participate in a federated network? And so we've built essentially a product around this side of federated data network, so addressing the needs of parties that ultimately need their data and IP protected. And that's something that we productized for the last 5 years, and I think is a pretty stable product. Now, when we speak about this collaboration, I think there's a lot of innovation and value as well on the application side. So where do you apply this to what model and what collaboration? So I think that's another pillar that is very important.
I'm actually going to get into the details of what model you're training, just for the benefit of our audience. But before I do that, to you both, I really wanted to understand your thought process in going into this consortium. Why did you trust Apheris, and how did you make the decision of participating in this consortium, which is kind of setting the example for the industry in a lot of ways? So what went into that decision?
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump into that real quick. We've at J&J, we've had experience with federated learning through a project that we called Melody.
Yeah.
And it was quite successful. It was something of a first of its kind. And that actually really gave us the confidence to go after this type of project again. And now I know it sounds like magic. There's a lot of credit to the AbbVie team, the J&J team, and the Apheris team to get this to where it is, because there's a lot of pieces that have to come together on top of and besides the technology component. And I think the buy-in to what is the return on the investment for doing this, what do we think we'll get out of it, plays into it. But because we're here and gone through that process, I think is a testament to what we think the value really is. And so I think that combined with our past experience and then the knowledge that we have gained in AI/ML to lead us in directions where we know we could do much better if we had a larger data set to work with, and we just can't produce that ourselves. That's basically led us to where we are here.
Yeah, it does sound like a goal that a lot of these customers have, that on their own, they are not producing enough diversity in some of these models. So what do you...
Yeah, I was going to call out the magic comment as well, because so two things can be true at the same time. The data that we have internally is hugely valuable, and we're tremendously protective of it because it's what we have, right? At the same time, sharing the data costs us nothing as long as we're doing it in a secure and federated way. And so as long as we have conviction that there's some return on investment, the contribution of data to a shared model, as long as it's done in a way that's enabling for all the partners in a sort of reasonably equal way, everybody benefits in a pre-competitive way, and that's hugely valuable for all of us. What it really costs us is data that we already have in hand, and so it's not financially expensive tremendously. So it's much cheaper to do this than it would be to go and collect all of that data ourselves internally. So from a value proposition, it's sort of the opportunity to have models that are built on much more diverse data than what we have internally at a relatively small cost, provided that it can be done in a way that's secure and preserves IP. I think it's sort of a no-brainer. And so we have this first application that we can dig into more today, and we have second and third applications planned already, because it's clear how much potential value there can be from sharing data in a collaborative way like this.
Yeah, so let's talk about that problem, just to understand what kind of problems are we solving in federated learning in drug discovery. So what's the first model you guys are training?
So the first one is predicting structures of small molecules bound to proteins. And so as many I'm sure are aware, there was initially a model called AlphaFold 2 that predicts protein structures, and then a subsequent model, AlphaFold 3, predicts protein structures with small molecules included. And this led to subsequent models, OpenFold 2 and OpenFold 3, that are open clones, essentially, of what AlphaFold is doing, open source clones. The limitation of these with respect to drug discovery, so obviously predicting protein structures without small molecules is not of so much interest to a small molecule focused team. Even with the inclusion of small molecules, though, these models are trained on the data, publicly available data, in this case the protein data bank, and this data set is collected primarily by academic as well as industry groups over the past 50 years. And there's been a lot of emphasis on biological small molecules, ligands of proteins, so metabolites and heme groups and ATP. And so the types of data that are there are tremendously useful for understanding biology and structural details of how proteins work. But drug-like chemical matter is sort of out of distribution from the bulk of the data that's publicly available. And those types of crystal structures of drug-like small molecules bound to proteins is what we have loads and loads of internally at AbbVie, locked away behind our walls, and J&J has the same, and every big pharma that works on small molecules has just huge collections of crystal structures of drug-like chemical matter bound to proteins. And so these are tremendously useful for fine-tuning models that are trained on public data, because the public models are essentially out of distribution for the applications that we really care about. With respect to diversity and why it makes sense to do this as a consortium effort, just to give some sense of numbers, we have many thousands of crystal structures of proteins bound to small molecules. But in the course of one drug discovery project, we have a single protein, and we solve, on average, say 30 or 50 structures of related small molecules bound to that protein. So the true diversity of what we have in this collection of many thousands of structures is less, because of the nature of how we work on individual targets in great detail. And so the opportunity to collaborate, for example, with J&J, who's worked on different targets over the years than we have at AbbVie, it greatly enhances the diversity of the collection of data that we can bring to fine-tuning. And so this seemed like a perfect opportunity that was ripe for collaboration in this context.
Yeah, and maybe thoughts from you around the fact that now both of you will have the same model, right? So does that sort of increase the pressure in terms of how do you generate differentiation? How do you think about that?
We'll just use it better than J&J, and we should be okay.
we picked better targets.
Excellent. So, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I think part of it's better targets, but also I think it's important to recognize that what this model is giving us is not drugs. What this model is a tool, which is a small piece of a much larger drug discovery operation. Exactly. And so this is one small enabling component. And so we very much view this in a pre-competitive context, that we're happy that J&J also has access to this tool, because so much of what they do is already so differentiated from what we do. And so both of us having access to this really terrific tool, I don't think that's going to lead to any sort of overlap down the line in terms of either disease focus or specific small molecules that arise from it. Those things are so far later, or earlier and later, than this particular one tool, so I don't think this moves.
Yeah, I think about it very much the same way, and that is we want to do a much better, we always want to do a much better job at accelerating and driving the process that we're working on. And so it's much more about the drug discovery project, the impact that has on our portfolio, where we're going with our bigger disease area strategy. And this is a tool that's going to help us do that better. So we don't think of it, we think of it that way.
I think that's exactly the right, and it seems the thought process is resonating. There are more members joining the consortium, right?
Yeah, so there's 6 top 20 pharma companies involved, so Boehringer, Takeda, Sanofi, AstraZeneca, a couple more in the process of joining. So
excellent, yeah. So I think that brings up the most important question, the role of AWS. I have to ask, we are at an AWS event, but when you're thinking about the platform on which you're building all of this, I'd like to probably know from Apheris on the partnership, right? Like how are we bringing all of this together, and what role AWS you think plays, or any cloud provider for that matter, who's trying to like get into the space of building a platform that jointly allows models to be trained across different aggregated data sets? Like what are some of the key aspects of that? What do you think?
Yeah, so we've been privileged to partner with AWS on this. I think everyone is. So there's a set of things that one needs to take into consideration when essentially training such a large model, right? So this is the equivalent of AlphaFold 3. That's 20 million GPU hours in pre-training. And so if you fine-tune that, that's a really large model. And so setting up infrastructure in a federated manner to enable training of such a large model, that comes with complexity. And we saw that today in the keynote, right? Like when you train large models, what if this model breaks? And these models do break. Like how do you make sure that you do not lose the information that the model has already learned? Then in a federated setup, you have complexities like as data is physically distributed, and there's like some, let's say, updates of information that allows this distributed training to happen, you need to make sure that this is efficient, because otherwise you train just much longer. And so for that, you need communication that is very fast. So these are technical challenges that AWS is providing tremendous value, not just in terms of helping us with, let's say, the resources, which is, of course, important and a critical undertaking, but as well helping us set this up in a way that a federated computing setup and a federated training run on that scale can actually happen. And to my knowledge, at least, and I mean, we are in the industry since 2019, so to my knowledge, this is the largest model that is in production trained in a federated manner on very large data sets. So this is a let's say, a pretty profound undertaking, and so the help of AWS on the infra side, but as well on setting this up such that it scales, is making a big difference.
Yeah, and I would add, so it took a lot for AbbVie as a sort of traditional drug discovery company to get comfortable with the idea of sharing data. But what really enables this is that we're not sharing data. We're training a model in a way that uses data from all the components, and the data is never in the same place at the same time. The data never really, so certainly what we would not be able to do is take our raw data and give it to J&J to train a model that we do together, because we can't share the data, right? Similarly, we wouldn't be comfortable uploading data to Apheris directly. And so the fact that the data that we have internally is hosted on AWS, and that's sort of our external source that we can be comfortable sharing the data to, is critical for enabling the project in a way that we couldn't with just Apheris and J&J. Yeah. So there again, AWS is really critical that we have a partner that we feel confidence in.
Excellent. And I was going to add to that, because all of these data assets sitting on AWS does make a difference, right? Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to add that the trust component is really important, and having built relationships over time in the past actually can give confidence and help us move forward in what might otherwise be kind of a sensitive topic, sensitive situation. So I think having J&J work with AWS for many years, this is a relationship that we've built, and I think that's a component that's also helpful.
And we value that very much. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to ask you a final question to each of you, and starting from Robin. What are you most excited about for the future when it comes to drug discovery and AI?
So, I mean, obviously, this network here is incredibly exciting for us, and I think as well for the industry. And so, looking ahead, I think there is, let's say, two aspects that we are really excited about within the AI Structural Biology Consortium. That's more parties joining, hence more parties contributing data of greater diversity. And so the setup that we have selected within the network is that it is built upon a structure where more parties can join over time, but as well more initiatives can be launched under the umbrella of the network. And that has been a lot of work from a legal and governance structure to set up, and now it's really there, and we see that in the numbers of more parties joining, and as well the new projects that are in scoping. I'm very excited about these new projects as well, and I'll let John speak to those because he'll be just much more eloquent on that. The final point that I'll make on what I'm excited about is I think we can as well take this principle of letting pharma companies collaborate, grow that within the AI Structural Biology Consortium, but as well beyond. And there's, of course, a lot of smaller companies out there that don't have the data sizes to potentially contribute here in the same manner as the large pharmas can, but still there are these networks as well for different forms of companies, and I think that's generally exciting as well, where we as well as Apheris support in. So yeah, those are the two main things, and the third one, I think John hopefully mentioned.
You're setting him up. That's
yeah, I'm giddy to talk about it because I get very excited about this stuff. I think humans are good at pattern recognition, and once you sort of have a clearly defined pattern in mind, it's so easy and exciting to sort of go out and recognize that pattern again and again. And that's exactly the case here, where the sort of idea that we have a problem where we have existing computational frameworks and public data sets that are a little bit out of distribution from what we really need to make them useful as tools for pharma, for drug discovery, where we have internally data that can be used to fine-tune these models. If you think about that pattern, it does come up again and again and again. And so looking for other places where we see precisely that pattern is precisely where this consortium structure can bring value. And so another example is in binding affinities, where there are models for predicting protein-ligand interactions, the strength of protein-ligand interactions. There's public data that these can be trained on, but those are a little bit out of distribution from what we have internally at AbbVie and at J&J and elsewhere. And so a subsequent project to predict protein-ligand binding affinities is sort of in the works that we've talked about a lot. And then predicting ADME and PK data, sort of multimodal models to take small molecule structures and predict properties from those, is a place where, again, there's public data that's a little bit out of distribution from what we have internally. We have huge data sets internally, but again, they're sort of punctate in how they sample chemical space. And so the opportunity to partner with other big pharmas that have equivalently huge collections of data that's just different from ours, and together we have better coverage of chemical space, seems truly transformative to me. So I'm tremendously enthusiastic for what we can do, both in terms of, from a model development standpoint, building small molecule foundation models is something that, I won't shut up about outside of this context, but then also bringing this consortium structure to bear on how we train these models. I think that's what I'm very, very excited about in the, say, 2 years ahead.
And maybe I'll just go back to first stop on the train. The more accurate, much better structure prediction is essential. We need it, and that's what we're really excited about. And that's first stop on the train leading to much more exciting opportunities down the road.
Excellent. Well, all I can say is that I'm rooting for this consortium to become the best consortium and the most successful consortium in drug discovery. And we are there for the journey. We will always, wish you luck and wish you well and give you all the resources that you need for this. So thank you again for spending the time. And it was great to hear from all of you about this project that you're undertaking.